Okay, good morning, good evening, good afternoon. Hello, everybody. Hi. Hello. Uh, where did we leave off yesterday? Sorry for the uh, long delay in getting started this morning. I just had a unexpected but wonderful visit. Um, let's see here. Clean up by name. I'm clearing my desktop here so I can start the stream. It displays. Okay, good. All right, let's see, friends. So, how are you doing this morning? How's everybody? Let me see. Good morning. I don't see comments. Oh, that's the old stream. Haha. Into the studio. Yeah. Open up. Yes. And so. Hello. Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. There we are. GMGAGE. What does that mean? Okay. Anyway, good stuff. Hi, everybody. So, where are we? Yesterday we looked at Apache FtpServer, which hopefully you'll never need to know about FTP. For those of you who are just joining in and you know don't know, FTP was a thing we used to move files around on the internet. Nowadays every file interaction is, well, my God, I mean, if you've ever used Dropbox, right, it just feels like a file system on your local machine, right? Because it is. It's actual file system that gets synced. But it used to be you would log into these things and well, today, so we'll talk about that, Simon. Good question. And we're using an actual FTP server or using a test container or yesterday, we set up an actual FTP server. And the reason we did it was because we wanted to set up both a thing we could use to move data back and forth via FTP, but also because this happens to be one based in Java, right? This is the Apache FTP server. And so in that, there's actually an integration with Spring Integration, which brings us back around to today's episode, right? We're going to talk about Spring Integration and FTP, and in particular, in addition to, there's also this nice opportunity to talk about the intersection of those two things. But FTP is a way that, I don't know, I mean, I hope I don't need to tell you this, but maybe I do. FTP was a protocol. You can use it to move files around. It's like a shared volume. Before Samba, before NFS, before all these, and Dropbox and Google Drive and whatever, before all those things, we had FTP. And then we had also the secure variants, SFTP and FTPS, which is basically, TLS plus FTP. Yeah, so you could, the idea, and yeah, the whole world, I mean, even today, right? We talked, I don't know if you saw the episode we had a few days ago with the amazing Spring integration lead Artem Bilan, who's I'm not worthy. I just I learned more from him than most people. And we talked about the amazing book, Enterprise Integration Patterns by Gregor Hoppe and Bobby Wolf. And in that book, they talk about 4 different ways for services and systems to be integrated, right? And Spring Integration aims to be a toolkit that addresses all 4 of those use cases. And one way by which systems can integrate today is RPC, right? And didn't we already do gRPC and RSocket? I mean, you've seen that before. In fact, if you think about REST, in the ways that matter, it's an RPC. Now I know it's not, okay, but in the ways that matter from the perspective of this book, I think you could qualify it as an RPC. It's some synchronous request response, and so it's not messaging, right? So REST HTTP is kind of RPC-ish. You've got XML RPC, you've got SOAP, you've got RSocket and gRPC, and a lot of things that are RPC-ish. And the basic idea is you're interacting with the resource synchronously, and you're beholden to that resource. When you get down to like a more refined perspective of RPC, a lot of them also export the idea that you're dealing with objects and you're invoking methods on those objects. That's one pattern, and I try to avoid it unless I'm using something like RSocket or gRPC or even REST if it's done correctly, right? And we've talked about that when we looked at Spring Boot in a few videos ago. We looked at all the different ways that Spring Boot supports web services, right? So that's part 1. Part 2 is the other way. Another way that you can use to integrate systems is with messaging, and this is go messaging first, right? I think about events and messaging first. I don't always bring in a message broker. You don't always have to, right? You can just do even communication within the same monolith, the same virtual machine can be done in a messaging style, right? You publish an event and something else listens for that event. I find that leads to the best architectures today. So that one's, I don't have to justify that. That's not really it happens to be the best architecture for new services, but it's also the best architecture for integration with old services, right? And so, if you have access to a broker, to a message bus of some sort, and you can integrate in terms of that broker, then you're in a good place. That's the ideal scenario for integration. And if that's your situation, then maybe you don't even need Spring integration. Maybe you move up the stack and use Spring Cloud Stream. Spring integration will serve you just fine right there, right? But in the situation where you have access to a broker and you can use it for all your services, you're already in a good place. That's what most of us would have loved to have. But when we talk about integration, really, in my mind, the reason we have integration technologies is to turn these other things that don't fit neatly into those two little buckets, RPC and messaging, to turn those things into things that we can talk to. Sometimes, even though those things are hostile to integration, right? And so, for example, files. Files are, one of the simplest primitives of any computer science student is going to be the file, the ye old file, right? Having a file in a certain place at a certain time, sometimes that's all you got, right? And if you think about how Hadoop got so big, it was because people realized, okay, these logs, we could harvest them and create a stream of data, or we can create data from it, right? We can mine these logs, and that became a whole business. And even before that, we had things like syslog-d and so on. So logs are super important, right? Files are important, and you wouldn't believe, but like even today, like I said, there's this huge ecosystem of mainframe integration, mainframe code, and IBM makes a ton of money even today selling COBOL and Kix, a lot of which is just serving the use case of, okay, I've got a file here, somebody dropped this file, I need to process it and then put out another file. The banks, the world runs on files, right? Still to this day, it's very simple, very transactional, very old, but it still happens all the time. But it's still kind of an anti-pattern. Nobody wants to think about the world in terms of files. You don't have any of the robustness guarantees of messaging, so you have to recreate all that. You don't have, you have to figure out how to find the file, and then you had an 8 gig log file a few days ago. It wasn't fun to deal with. Exactly. Oh yeah, AWS has S3 plus SQS. Exactly. That's a S3 is like your file system. SQS is like your message queue. So that's a thing, right? And then the fourth way that people integrate is with shared databases, right? And so my hope is we're going to kind of go through Spring integration, and we'll take a look at how Spring integration supports all 4 of those patterns, those approaches, those styles of integration. And I'm not saying we'll just look at one particular thing, right? We've already seen my hello world for Spring integration, for Pete's sakes, is local file system integration, right? You drop a file in a folder, and then Spring integration picks it up. So we've already started to see this, and it was just so that we had something with which we can deal without having to introduce too much about it, right? Like everybody understands directories and files, right? Okay, so good. So today we're going to move on to another kind of file. Like I said, we're going to look at FTP, and eventually we'll, when we work through this series, we'll look at messaging in terms of, probably RabbitMQ and Kafka, maybe MQTT. We'll look at file integration. We've already looked at basic local file system stuff. I guess we'll review that very quickly today. We'll look at FTP, which is the other thing that we set the stage for yesterday. We set the table for that yesterday. And then we'll look at shared databases, which is like the ickiest, right? That's the one I would, it's the most hostile to loosely coupled systems. Because remember, the goal here, friends, is to integrate things that are either hostile to integration or to integrate things that are perhaps amenable to integration, but to do so in such a way that they remain as loosely coupled as possible. The reason we want loosely coupled is because loosely coupled is optionality. Loosely coupled give you options, and options are what you have architecture for, right? We have architecture to buy us options. The choices we make in our architecture are to give us options, and those options, they're up to you. They're dimensions in which you think you might want to head down, paths that you might want to take in the future that you want to leave open for yourself, right? So you architect a system with constraints and with paths that you want to walk in the future in mind, right? The constraints might be cost. It'd be great if every computer, if I could just use one computer for a simple, word count, right? I could spin up a whole new container, but that's grossly inefficient, right? Until you get serverless, which is somehow they figure that out, right? They use multi-tenant containers, right? But in theory, it'd be nice. You could definitely guarantee you have no noisy neighbor problems if you could spin up a whole new computer for every single function, right? It sounds nice, but then you realize, oh, okay, before serverless, this meant millions of dollars just to do basic computing. There's no way that's going to work, right? So then you think, okay, well, maybe I'll do multi-tenant, and what are the constraints of that? And then you get things like CGI bin and or the servlet container, or the servlet spec. So these constraints, these things, they inform what you're going to do. They're driven by cost and other real world ambient concerns, and you choose. You can't have everything. You choose a certain thing one way or another, so that you can you have an option later on, right? So when we use integration, it's all about preserving as much optionality as possible while also meeting constraints, right? And I know that sounds generic and broad, but you really start to think about all problems in terms of those dimensions when you work with integration technologies. And remember, as we move forward in time, everything that's ever been written becomes something with which somebody will have to integrate downstream, right? Every bit of code written today is somebody else's headache for integration tomorrow, unless you take care to make it more amenable to that integration, right? And today we all think APIs first. We all think about how we are going to publish and consume these technologies, and it might seem really obvious. It seems like very obvious. Let's just build REST. What if HTTP for services just goes the way of the dodo in 10 years or whatever? What if it's gone tomorrow? You just don't know. It seems so obvious today, and then tomorrow everything changes and it becomes a chore. Obviously, HTTP is pretty resilient, right? I don't think that's going to go away. But suppose, we've all thought, oh, this will never go away. Everybody will have access to this forever and ever and ever. But things change. Okay, so let's see here. Where are we? Hello, everybody. I'm just catching up on messages. Hello from India. Oh, hello. Good afternoon. Good evening. Hi. 8 gig lock file. Okay, let me see. I used to work with payment systems and still have to process end-of-day files for payment reconciliation. That's a thing that happens, right? For real. I mean, it seems brittle, but it's also pretty transactional, right? Like you have a file, you process it, you're done with the file. That's it. Either the job is done or it's not. And we talked about Spring Batch. Like there's two, when you think about a file sync, a file transfer integration flow, there's the question came up the other day. How do I deal with what is the difference between batch and integration? Basically, I would use Spring integration to notice the new file. So suppose I want a Spring integration thing. I want something to monitor a directory. I build a Spring integration inbound adapter that pulls a FTP mount or an NFS mount or whatever. There's even, I think we even have a Samba adapter. I mean, if you want to specifically connect to a network store that isn't mounted on your computer, which you could. Hello from late at night in Thailand. Hello. Hi, thanks for joining us. Anyway, there's that Spring integration can tell you there's a new file, but you wouldn't want to use Spring integration to process the file unless it's very small, right? But if it's got like a million rows or whatever, you want to make sure that you process it correctly. That would be something for which Spring Batch is well suited, right? Okay, that leads to the following question. Can you really build a system that's manageable in the future without just being called legacy? No, but you want to give yourself as many options as possible. And, where there's also different values of the future, right? The far-flung future 20 years from now? Yeah, no, good luck. You're not going to be able to predict that. But what about next year, where you're probably still going to be working at the company, right? When we build for optionality, we do it primarily because we don't want to impose upon ourselves. We want to give ourselves as much optionality as possible, right? Because you're going to be the person tasked with maintaining that thing next month or a year from now or whatever, probably, right? Um, so be nice, build in optionality, build a good architecture today, because you'll thank yourself later, and then as a knock-on effect, the person that succeeds you 10 years from now will thank you, maybe, hopefully, if you did it in such a way that it can be used in a reliable way, right? um, if your pattern of integration is just to open up a shared SQL database to everybody, then yeah, people are probably going to curse your name under their breath in 5 years, right? That's no way to run a railroad. Okay, let's see. Got my screen, present, share screen, entire screen, share. Okay, friends. That. So, which career path is good, UI or backend? I would choose backend every day twice, and that's because um, I'm not very smart, right? The complexity of the modern front end far exceeds the complexity of any backend architecture, and I mean, I include AI in that, right? There's just so many constraints and so many weird ways to work with user interfaces today that it can be overwhelming for me, for as a simple person with simple needs. But you know, like if you're particularly smart, then yeah, go for a UI. I'm sure that's very satisfying. But even there, in the same way that the back end field is not dominated by there's no single, like, people working in AI are not necessarily the same people working in Spring, or not necessarily the same people working in big data processing, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So, and in that same way, being a UI developer, it what does that mean? Is that iOS? Is that Android? Is that native apps on the desktop? Is that your web browser? I mean, you could pick a path and spend a lot of time in any one of those paths. So for me, I don't know. I like UIs. I like building them. I'm just not very good at it. Okay. So where did we leave off, friends? We move. Okay. Yeah. So this is the code that we built yesterday. Let's review that. Oh, full stack DevOps. Oh yeah, that's true. Yeah. Well, there's DevOps too. That's another backend concern, right? Really, if you think about it, like the art of moving code in a reliable way to production, right? That's its own pursuit. Um. Yeah, okay, that font is a little too big. So for those of you who just joined, hello from Bulgaria. Oh, hey, Bulgaria. Which part of Bulgaria? I love Bulgaria. And thank you for the nice comments. I'm just starting to wrap my head around reactive programming. I loved your videos from conferences. Well, thank you so much. And I'm glad you're getting something out of them. And I miss Bulgaria a lot. Um, Bulgaria they have an adult beverage there. They have a libation called rakia, which will, whew, yeah, you'll find yourself, the room will be spinning and you'll be like, oh, I should write some PHP code. And then that's when you know you've had too much time to go home. Dashan always gives great talks. Yeah. Did you see you saw the new dramatically simplified test container support? That's awesome. Yeah. The other thing I love about Bulgaria is they have something called skambeche, which is like, forgive me if I'm screwing up the pronunciation. The skambeche is like this stomach plus milk plus spice. It's what they feed you to bring you back to life after you've had too much rakia, yeah. Anyway, great memories. And the fact that I have memories is also notable, right? Because I was certain I would forget everything after a little bit of rakia. I met Jean-Claude Van Damme in Bulgaria like 11 years ago. Yeah. Um, yeah. Yeah. See, Damien knows. He knows. Okay, so let's move on. Let's get into this. What did we do yesterday? I just want to rehash so people are on the same page. We're not going to rebuild everything, obviously, but very quickly here. We used the Apache FtpServer, right? The Apache FtpServer is pretty trivial. This is all the code that's required to get a working FTP server out of the box, and you can point it to something called a user manager. And there are different implementations. There's even some that are provided out of the box that work with property files, and another one that works with a SQL database. Excuse me. These different user managers are provided out of the box, but none really suited what I wanted to do, was just to have an in-memory demonstrably interesting sort of user management system, so you could kind of see what the integration hooks look like. So most of the stream that we did yesterday was building our own. So we built something called a default user manager. That's this implementation here. You can see I've got a type of object called a user, and the user has to answer questions like, hey, what's the user's name, the password, the authorities. Let's inline that variable. Good. The authorities are basically what permissions are allowed for the entity, and we even have this like authorized method that handles. It looks at questions like, okay, what is the concurrent login request? Can they handle that? What about transfer rate request and write request, etc. We look at the max idle time. Is this user enabled? And very importantly, what's the home directory? Hi, Dejan, good to see you, buddy. So we've got all these properties here, these different entities that tell you about the user, and you can. And again, I've just got a default user manager, which has a dictionary of usernames to user. Oh, it looks like I'm not even using that. Oh, nice. What a difference the day makes. Okay. And then the user manager has to answer questions. It does feel like the Spring Security user manager, and that's a thing I even broached yesterday, which is there's no reason you couldn't implement this using Spring Security. You couldn't just delegate to an identity provider of your choice using the corresponding Spring Security integration, or just interfaces. Really, I think you could probably get all the way there with interfaces. But basically, you're asking questions in terms of these. This user manager, and you have to answer questions like get user by name, get all users, delete the user, right? This is why the default authentication support in Spring Security wouldn't necessarily work. You need to be able to mutate the users. You need to be able to save an instance of the users, check and see if it exists, and then authenticate a user. So authentication here, I'm just saying, okay, if it's a username and password authentication, then extract out the username and password, check the user's dictionary to see if it's got an entry for that user. If it's got an entry, then check that the password matches. This is the worst thing you can do. This is completely inefficient code. And remember, we all took a blood oath yesterday that we're not going to tell Rob Winch about this. You promised, okay? Oh, yeah, font size, no problem. Reset to, how's that? Okay, anyway, we all talked about this yesterday. Do not tell Rob Winch that I wrote this code. He will be sad. We don't like it when he's sad. It's bad for everybody. So yeah, basically that's it. And then there's this business. Is the user an admin? And what is the admin name? I don't know what this is supposed to do. It doesn't seem interesting. So I've just defaulted the values and returned quote, and false. Hasn't caused me any trouble yet, but I'm sure I'll find a problem with it later. Properties.root. Oh, I guess I don't need it there either. Okay. Well, okay. So there's that. And then we created this. So we created an instance of default user manager, and we're using the default user manager to register some users. And I registered 3 users here, just random names and stuff. Let me add. Oh, Sean. There you go. Okay. So yeah, just adding some users to the Apache FTP server. Great. Okay, good. Not a big deal. The last thing we did, and I was planning on punting on this. Okay, I was trying to wrap up yesterday's stream, and I'm like, let's just try. Let's just see if it compiles to a native image. And well, I thought we had like 10 minutes left, and I was going to sign off. I was done for the day, and I said, just on a lark, let's compile it. And it didn't quite work the first go, but it was like 2 compiles later, it worked. I needed to had this processor, the NIO processor for reflection, and I needed to register this resource bundle, this resource property file. And then it works. So it also compiles into a native image. So that's what we did yesterday. We turned Apache FtpServer into an FTP server that compiles to a Gravium native image that starts up in like 17 milliseconds or something like that. And so I'm using, okay, we talked about that. We should be using Java 20, but there's no Gravium native image for Java 20 just yet. I'm using Java 17, but as soon as Java 20 comes out, I'm gonna, I think Simon said he's expecting it in a month or something like that. That sounds about right. I remember hearing them say there'll be about a month offset or delay or whatever. Java 20 came out on the 21st, friends. That's 2 days ago, 48 hours ago. It's in SDK, man. You can just SDK list Java and install it, right? Let's see. Which version of Java am I using? 22.3 R17 Gravium. Okay. Okay. So this is what we did yesterday, and what we're going to do is we're going to start this up. Yeah. Yeah. SDK command install. Dang right. Good stuff. We're going to start this instance up, and we'll use that to talk to it from Spring integration. So for now, we'll just leave this here. We're not going to come. We're going to come back to this later. We're going to see that there's an actual integration with Spring integration and FtpServer and Apache FtpServer. Yesterday, we discovered in our quest to understand FTP and to make it work, we discovered a very convenient FTP was it? Oh, FTP. Yeah. LFTP U PW localhost. Okay. Here, and so if I go over here, you can see I've got interesting. It's acknowledging that somebody has done this, and because we set the root directory, where did we set the root directory? We used Spring's property management, so we set the root directory to home desktop root. So you go here, desktop root, along, and there's nothing there, right? Okay, so I need a file, so I'll say put. First, let me create a file. Desktop echo random to random. Okay, and so that's a few files for us to play with. So we can say desktop 10060, 6 bytes transferred. If we go here, there's this file. Okay, so we have an FTP server. We're able to talk to it. It's a valid FTP server. I'm able to use the FTP client that wasn't written with FTP server particularly in mind, and I'm able to conduct files across the network. Seems like we now are we have a stable working FTP server. Let's now build a client using Spring integration. So start that Spring IO. And by the way, we've got the code for all this as always. GitHub.com, Coffee Software Show, repositories, and let's code Spring integration. So this code, this code is online right here. Coffee Software Show, let's code Spring integration. Basics. Okay, so I'm going to add a new folder here. Let's see. Clone. Okay. Give me 1 second. Okay, so anyway, sorry about that. So we've got that here. I'm going to create a new folder. It's cloned. Let's code Spring integration, and we'll create a new folder there called FTP or something like that. Okay. Actually, I could probably just copy the code. Okay, so back to start.spring.io, downloads. Okay. Almost gonna have to trash bin over. Feet. Go here, start.spring.io. Okay, I'm gonna call this FTP integration. Okay, I'm gonna use Spring integration, GraalVM, and that's it. We'll hit enter. Okay. UAO FTP integration. Did they release? Oh, they did. Spring Boot 3.05 must have come out last night. Start that Spring.io. Oh, look at that. What's this? March 23. That's this morning. Java 20 support. Nice. Official Java 20 support. It came out 2 days ago, and then 1 day ago, or less than in the last 24 hours, we get Spring Boot 3.05 with Java 20. That is nice. Nice. And by the way, everybody's always asking, how can you contribute? Check out the ideal for contribution tag in the issues repository. Here are some issues. If you want to contribute to Spring Boot, go grab one of these issues. People who are always asking, go grab one of these issues, say, hey, I might be able to help. And then somebody from the Spring Boot team will mentor you, right? These are open. They're ideal for contribution. See that? They put that in the release notes. How cool. Like, these issues have been here before Spring Boot 3.05, but they put them there to encourage community support because they're awesome. Okay. So 3.05, that's nice. That's nice. Good stuff. That's better. Better. I inadvertently shut it down. Okay. So got that. That's good. So all the stuff we did yesterday was against 3.04. It's a brand new, brave new world. We got that. We'll open this up in our IDE. Photoshop running. Okay. My IDE. Here we go. FTP integration. FTP integration here. Okay, so again, let's just start with file systems, right? Again, because I want you to kind of see how the Spring integration gives you optionality, right? So integration flow, inbound file flow, okay? And in order to use both FTP and file, you need to have the appropriate adapter. And so you can just do that by adding the dependency. And then FTP and shift I. Okay, looks like it's downloaded. And we can say integration flow dot from get, and then the from is from an inbound adapter. And so let's try file dot. No, not that one. Oh. Spring framework, Spring integration FTP, Spring integration file. Seem legit. No. Inbound adapter. Okay. So, same as always, I'm going to inject a value here. Desktop in file in auto create directory. Yes, please. Okay. Get. Okay. So there's the inbound adapter files. And then what happens when we get that? Well, we're going to say here's a new generic handler for an object of type file. And we're going to say the payload is payload, and we got the message headers. All we're going to do is just log out the information, right? We're not going to do anything special here. But did I add lum back to this? I probably didn't. Whatever. Okay. So as the file arrives, system out payload get absolute file. And then headers dot for each kv system out the k equals v. All right. So I'm just logging the payload and the headers related to the file so we can kind of see what we get. Is it with lambda restart? Good. So we're going to monitor this directory on the desktop, cd desktop, cd in move, or sorry, copy 78, whatever, echo random to random. There's the file. Okay, not a big deal. Now, a couple things. What about that batch processing thing that we talked about earlier, right? Imagine you're looking at the directory, and so this is going to scan that directory by default every 1 second, right? You can control how often it scans that directory by configuring a poller. So poller metadata, poller.fixed rate is, let's say, whatever. I can do 1 time unit minute, okay, or 1 sec, or every 10 seconds, right? So it'll look in the directory and it'll see if there's new files, and if there's a new file, it'll get a Java IO file, and then send the Java IO file as a message, as a payload for a message. So that'll get sent to handle, which will then print it out, and then we'll just terminate the flow right here. Okay, that's nice. Okay, what about, so every 10 seconds we'll see a new file. What happens? I've got this file in here, right? I've got the message. You can see I've got the message here. If I restart this, and I got the message again. Okay, so we got a problem here. I've got the same, if I restart the service, or if I lose the state, then that file will get redelivered. So there's some things that we should care about here. Like, one is, integration flow over here. So there's some things that we can do to prevent duplicates. Okay, for example, true. So what does this do? Prevent duplicates. Configures an accept once file list filter. If prevent is true, otherwise accept all. So true to configure an accept once file list filter. What does this do? Is this looking at the okay, I helped write this. That's why I'm so confused about it. That passes files only one time. This can be conveniently used to prevent the duplication of files, as is done in file reading message source. Okay, it's thread safe, good for us. We did it, go team. But does it actually keep state? Because at some point I added support for state. So monitor scene set. Okay, that's, oh, so it's using a set. So that's still in memory, right? It's still in memory, right? So this is going to work. Okay, so let's, like, I think that's enabled by default, right? In fact, I'm not even, it should be default except once. Let's see, filter expression files filter set reception file reading message source. Pretty sure that's default, right? Oh, that's cool. Recursive directory scanner. So that's kind of interesting. So wait, what if I did that? I haven't done that before, because I don't think I have. I go here, another one, cd another. Does it find that? It did. Look at that. That's so cool. Oh, it found the folder. It didn't even find it. Forget about the file. It found the folder, first of all. That's interesting. So do we want that? Like, do we want to have a filter? So I guess that's another thing we can care about, is filtering on the kind of file. So filter is a file list filter. So new file list filter, and a better interface. Filter, expression, pattern filter, regular expression filter. So there's a lot of different filters here, but if you just want to, here we go, function, that's what I'm looking for. Filter function. So given a file, return true or false. And I can say file is directory, or sorry, is just file. There you go. So that's, I only care about the file if it's a file, okay? Oh, there you go. And can we file? Okay, so let's try that again. Will it show us the file or will it show us the directory? It showed us this file. Good. It didn't show us the directory. What about the original one, the first one? Oh, because, okay, so that's the other thing is we waited 10 seconds. So payload, here's another payload. Oh, see, we should, okay, I need Lombok. And I know I need yeah, I need Lombok. Why do I need Lombok? I need Lombok because I want my logging. So, okay, paste, build.gradle. No. ID. Okay, restart. And then we'll just log out the details here. So SLF for J. Start. Okay. So now let's look at the times. So the payload, where's that? Payload is at this time, which is 10 o'clock, 10 o'clock, 10:36. Is that the hour or the time? Oh, it's the minute. Oh yeah. So 10:22. And then we should expect it at 46, the next one, right? So here's another payload at 46. So it's waiting 10 seconds before delivering each message. That poller is only delivering one message at a time, even though both messages were there. So it's not like it hasn't detected the message. It's just delivering it to us downstream every 10 seconds, okay, as a consumer. That's what the poller is giving us. That's the first thing. The prevent duplicates isn't durable. That's the other thing, right? So when you talk about batch processing, what you want is to make sure, first of all, that the file doesn't get processed again, or that it doesn't get processed before it's ready, okay? And this is a particularly important with file-based synchronization and integration, right? Because imagine you're uploading a batch file. You're an FTP client, and you're uploading a batch file with a million rows, okay? Well, you've uploaded the bytes for the first 500,000 rows, but not all of them. So you've got a file that's not it's not completely written, and it's called data.csv or something like that. Well, if you're looking for all the files, like I could have a filter here. I could have a filter that says, okay, is the file and does file.get name to lowercase, does it end with CSV, right? If it ends with CSV, then it'll get picked up on by this, okay? And that may not be what you want. So a lot of file system integration is based on the idea that you upload the file with like a different name. Maybe you upload the file as csv.temp from the client, and then when the client is done, and only when it's done, then you change the file descriptor to point to the correct name. You rename it, you move it from .csv.temp to just .csv. Yeah, you can check the last update time. Yeah. So how do you mean though? That's a good question. Like we like to check the file's last update time. Yeah. Why? To see when it was like last written. The idea being that if it hasn't been updated in like a minute. Oh, well, I don't know. I mean, I The last update time could work, but the last update time might be the only way to go if you can't get the client to do the rename, right? That's again the nature of integration is such that you're always second guessing the protocol between client and server, right? And so if the client doesn't have, maybe you've got code that's just been uploading to FTP for the last 20 years, and you can't get it to change what it's doing, it's just going to dump that file every day. Then maybe you need some way to detect whether that file's been, if nobody's writing to it, you could check the last update time and see if the file is older than like the last year or whatever, if it's not been updated in like 24 hours, then maybe it's completely done writing and we can start processing it. You just don't know, right? You assume by that point the client will have reconnected and finished writing or updated it or deleted it or whatever. And in practice, with today's fiber relays and all that stuff, if your poller is 10 seconds, most files, maybe you make it a minute, maybe make it 10 minutes, most files will be done writing by that point, right? If you write it. So the only thing is you got to worry about it like finding the file just as you start writing it, the very first byte, or something like that. But if you manage to write in between the 10-second scans or 10-minute scans, then most files, I can't imagine a file big enough that it would take 10 minutes on modern internet speeds. But you don't know. You just don't know. Maybe the FtpServer software is the bottleneck, right? The FtpServer software that we wrote, that we built yesterday using Apache FtpServer, the rate is only 10 megabits per second, I guess. So you just don't know. There might be artificial bottlenecks. Maybe there's too many users in the file system, and so it's throttling. You just don't know. So it's good to have a pattern to dedupe that, right? And this is a thing you don't have to worry about with databases, because it's either there or it's not. It's atomic, right? You have transactions. It's a thing you don't have to worry about with messages, because you can use the message is either there or not. It's one thing or another. You might have dupes, but they're at least whole dupes. They're atomic. They're either wholly there or they're wholly not. Okay, so this kind of stuff, it's the devil, right? It makes working with files a lot more complicated than it need be. Okay, so you've got the filter function, but we still also have, so we want to make sure that this file doesn't get scanned again, right? And one way to do that would be, of course, to take the file and move it. So as soon as you're done processing it, move it, right? So, you could do a transform, you could do something like that. What other functions do we get here out of the box with the inbound file adapter, though? Recursive, scan each poll. So scanning, oh, that's interesting. So scanning would do, so what I just said earlier is true, right? If I guess the idea here is that if it's already found files and it's got that in its buffer, it's not going to scan for more, right? So it's only each time it polls, each time the poller runs, it'll give you whatever file it's got in its buffer, and if there's nothing in its buffer, it'll do a scan. But I guess this is saying it'll do a rescan each time. Is nice, that's nice. You can also use it. You can, as of Java 7, which is again more than a decade old at this point, you can also use a watch service, Java 7 NIO watch service, to say, okay, use the watch service to be notified, and to put you will still only get the messages every 10 seconds as is configured here, but it'll detect the file almost instantly, and that actually might work against your favor if you're relying on, because you don't want the code to see the file before it's ready, right? So you can use the watch service. I use the watch service almost all the time. That's a good idea. What does the scanner do? New directory scanner. Kind of like a walker. List files. Filter. Locker. Oh, wow. So if these individual functions aren't doing the work for you, like prevent dupes and the custom filter function, if none of that is like quite getting what you want, it looks like you could just override everything. You can control the whole engine, that listing which files are returned from a given directory, what files should be kept according to this filter. The file locker, right? The file locker is a strategy that can ensure that files are only processed a single time. Implementations are free to implement any relation between locking and unlocking, This means that there are no safety guarantees in the contract. Defining these guarantees is up to the implementation. If a filter respects locks, is required to extend abstract file locker filter instead. So tries to lock the given file and returns true if it's successful, otherwise false. So this is an implementation, this is an interface that you can use to tell Spring Integration whether a file can be processed, basically. So here we go. Convenience-based class is lockable, implements that, extends abstract file list filter. Cool. File. So is lockable. What does this do? Lock cache. Where's the lock cache? Lock cache is this, I guess it's just a map. Yeah, lock cache. So this is a map kept in memory, right? Again, this is all not durable. None of this is durable. So what you want to do is make sure it doesn't get redelivered and reprocessed and put in memory again. So the natural thing to do there is, as soon as you've gotten the work done, you move it, right? And here you could use an outbound file adapter. So we can say, let me go down here. Outbound file adapter. Okay. What about inbound? Equals files dot outbound adapter. And I'm gonna, same thing. I'll say in out. So that's an out. Same thing. We'll have the framework create the directory for me. And then we can create a file. We can give it a file name generator. So if you want to like move things to a canonical thing, like file name generator. Maybe you want these files. Maybe you've written the data in the file to a database and it's given you a unique ID. And so now you want to name each new file based on that ID, right? So maybe you've got some business logic that you can use. But for my case, I'll just say that the name of the file will just be the current time as a string, right? So long to string. There's that. What else do we want? For the outbound file, we got the auto create is true. File exists mode. So, oh yeah, what happens if it's already there? You want to append to it? Do you want to fail? Do you want to ignore it? I mean, which would basically override it. Like, what do you do? Or I guess ignore would not override it. It would just keep writing, right? It would just keep going. So, and do you want to fail? I think fail is probably a good idea, but you can see there's fail, ignore, append, replace, append, but don't flush, right? So maybe replace, maybe fail. These are the kinds of things you have to think about if you have a duplicate file. What else? What permissions do you want, right? For your file, you want to flush it. Preserve timestamp. Oh, that's kind of interesting. So if your original inbound file has a timestamp, do you want to preserve the output file's timestamp? I would think so. Here's another thing. Do I want to delete the source file? Yes, please. Once I've copied it, please delete it from the original directory. Okay. So handle outbound file adapter. Okay. In this case, I need to return the payload. And remember we talked about those headers. Those headers tell you what the original file was. It says file, original file. So it knows no matter what you do, it originated the message from this folder and this file and whatever, right? Did we change the file is file? Yeah. Okay. That. Why did it find this directory? Is my file not correct? Wait, oh, outbound. Sorry. This is inbound. Outbound. Oh, outbound. Sorry, from inbound. And then this is the outbound. but I'm still confused. So why it found that directory? There, it found the file in the directory. That's all we wanted, right? So it found the file, and then let's switch the puller to more than once every 10 seconds because it takes forever. Yeah, it found the directory itself. Why is that? Why is that true? Is this test? And for that matter, like, why is it delivering things that don't end with CSV? What did I do wrong there? Filter. Oh, by the way, ignore hidden. You can tell it to ignore files that start with dot. That might be another pattern. You could upload the file to dot with, like, my CSV, my.csv, and then when you're done, rename it to just my.csv. I'm wondering if these things are mutually exclusive. Like filter function. Did I just get rid of the what did I just get rid of? Recursive. Ooh, okay. Where's my polar? Polar inbound auto create directory. Here, okay, 1 second. Restart. This one, the generic file handler, this one, it doesn't. I'm wondering why this would get anything. Okay, is it now doing the right thing? Did I fix it? Like 1 second. Let's just get rid of the polar. In fact, okay, we'll just default to 1 second. So now it's not returning anything. So I think because I had a directory and it wasn't recursive, this filter wasn't getting invoked. You got to watch for that. That's an interesting. There's some quirk. There's some interaction I don't understand there. So now it hasn't delivered any of these things, right? I can create that new file. Doesn't seem to notice it. But now as soon as I do .csv, that worked. Nope. Still don't know what the issue is. It's not delivering this file. Well, it's not finding anything anymore. Like now it's just, is it? Like I would expect this to light up, but it's not happening. Well, maybe it is happening. Oh, because I don't have system out anymore. I'm using logging. So get rid of that, get rid of that. Where's the, if I'm debugging, wouldn't I expect to see this right here? Yeah, it's not lighting up at all. Okay, let's try this again. Oh, there's nothing in the, it's doing what I asked it to do. The problem exists between the keyboard and the desk. Yeah. Oh, so dumb sometimes. Okay. Guess I told it to delete the source files. So guess what it did? It deleted the source files. Of course it did. That's what we asked it to do very clearly. Yeah. Sometimes I feel like not enough. Not enough. This is my morning coffee session, and I need more coffee. I'm sitting here navel gazing, just trying to figure out why this thing hasn't redelivered the messages. And the reason is because it has. We've told it not to because we told it to delete the. I didn't have enough. You're right. You're right. Clearly not enough. Okay, so RMRF out, CD in. So let's restart that. Okay. We're going to create a random file in the input directory. Why did that get delivered? So I am still right. There's something weird going on here. This file shouldn't get delivered if it's being tested for this, right? It doesn't end with CSV, does it? Did I miss something? That file very clearly doesn't end with CSV. So we're using the wrong function. This is for files filtering, but it's not the, let's see. We're doing something very silly here. Auto create directory, filter function, filter. This is not the same. So new file list filter, okay. Stream of files dot filter. Right? Nope. What is this function? New int function, please. Given an int, just want to return a file. What is this? What's that about? So we have a, I'm just going to do it the old-fashioned way. To list of file to array of new file. Oh, it doesn't have to be an array back. Oh, that's weird. It takes array in. It takes an array in, but it doesn't leave one back. So does that do the right thing if we filter it there in the file list filter? Does that dedupe the inbound records? Okay. Oh, let's. Bye, bud. See you soon. Let's see. We are going to do that. Why does that get delivered? Okay, what do we got here? Okay, why? Isn't that interesting? It's not even involving the filter. Why isn't it? It just gets delivered directly. The filter's not being involved. Okay, so I'm sure there's something here. Because I have prevent duplicates? No. What do I have here? Auto create directory, locker. Filter function. When does this stuff get involved, I wonder? That's what I'm trying to figure out. Why does this filter get used? So if you configure the filter, it's a file list factor being set filter. Filter set equals true. What is this? Reading message source set filter. Let's go check that one out. Okay, set a file list filter by default, except once filter is with no bounds is used. In most cases, a customized file list filter will need to deal with modification and duplication concerns. If multiple filters are required, composite. Okay. So scanner, set directory, reception order comparator. Scanner default directory scanner. Okay, so what does this do? This has a default filter of ignore hidden file list filter and accept once file list filter. And we're setting a composite. Okay. The filter then try claiming list files, list eligible files. What does this use? Directory. So all files get considered with that. Okay. This that filter files. So list files is returning with this filter. This filter is the file list filter. So if we override the file list filter, is that what we're supposed to be doing? So how come this isn't doing it? Do we want a composite filter? Set of new ignore hidden file list filter. New what was the other one? Ignore hidden and except once. Okay. What's this? File. It's with that. Sure, whatever. And finally, this one is the final one, right? So okay, so the set new files. Am I planning on SFTP? I mean, not really, but you'll once we see the FTP, you'll see it's basically the same as SFTP from the Spring Integration perspective. So as long as you have a valid SFTP server somewhere, you plug in the credentials for the SFTP adapter, should be the same. Okay, did that deliver? It delivered it. Why did it deliver that? Why? So auto create directories. What thing could be causing this trouble? Well, I don't know. It's not that big a deal though, obviously, because wait. Oh yeah, okay. Because I can just filter the message itself, right? So ignore all that. We don't want to do auto create directory, that's fine. You can do recursive, you can do all that kind of stuff, prevent duplicates, all that kind of stuff is there by default. You can have a pattern filter. I guess maybe this will do. Let's just try it. So we want to only see CSV files. So does that get delivered? It does. Well, these filters seem useless here, but it doesn't really matter because, like I said, this is Spring Integration, and you can always just create a filter here. So file.class is the filter, new generic selector file. You say source dot is file and source dot get name ends with .csv. Right? Now for sure. Okay, very simple. I don't understand what those filters are supposed to do in the inbound adapter though. So I'm creating as many files as I want, but if I create a .csv, then we see the file gets delivered, right? That's how you would do that. That's easy enough. So the inbound adapter, the outbound adapter, pretty simple. You just work with these adapters. Now we can switch this to FTP. Okay, FTP is a different thing. Each time, I don't know. So deleting the source file. So when you get data from the file system, it's one thing. But when you get data from another FTP server, the FTP inbound adapter will take the data from the remote FTP server, copy it to a local directory, and then that is what gets sent downstream here. Okay, so this is still going to delete the source file, but it's going to delete the source file on the local file system relative to the inbound adapter. So let's comment this out. Actually, let's commit our atrocities first of all. Is this a Git repository? It is not. Okay, close that out for a second here. CD desktop let's code Spring integration. Make clear files, CD files, move, download to this. Okay. Bring this up again. Okay, now instead of using files, we'll use FTP, right? Or Spring Framework integration.ftp.bsl. And then here, we specify our session factory, right? So we have to build up a session factory. What is the, is this using Spring? Oh, okay, remote session factory, a Spring integration file remote session factory. And it's a functional interface returning a session. This is in turn going to use a default FTP or default FTPS session factory, right? So I'm going to use FTP session factory. And then that in turn, let's see, that can be a separate bean, I suppose. Right, var set config, set host, localhost, set password, set username. Okay. Okay. So there's the FTP session factory. So let's see. I think you probably want to extract this out into a separate bean. I'm not sure if it all that much matters, but just in doubt, extract it out, you know? Good stuff. So there's that, and I'm going to inject the default. Okay. Okay, so what options does this inbound adapter give us? Oh, it gives us those very confusing filters. Okay, auto create local directory. Remember, it's going to copy to the local file system, and then from there, the rest of Spring integration gets to use it. So do I want to create the local directory? Yes, please. Local directory is going to be what? Where do I want to copy the files to? And so I might have a I can just use the local. I'll just create a new folder here called local. And actually, let's move everything here to under FTP or files or something, so that I don't have to clean up all these droppings on my desktop after every stream. I'm going to call this local, FTP local, FTP local. Oh, that's very kind. I'm glad you enjoy. Thank you so much for that. Appreciate it. And don't worry, we're all, you know, we're all learning something, right? Just because one of us knows a little bit about something doesn't mean that we don't know. We don't know. I mean, it doesn't mean we're not struggling with something else, you know. So, being a junior developer is we're all we forever, no matter how long you've done it. But yeah, welcome to the community. Welcome, I appreciate it. And I'm glad you like the silliness around start.spring.io. Remember, start.spring.io saves me. I'm sure people who've used Java before Spring Boot starters, they can tell you. I mean, start.spring.io, the starters that you get and the generated build, that could be, you know, managing your versions and all that stuff. I mean, it just used to be like day one, you know, day one of a new project. Okay, we're going to incept a new project. day one is like architecture and discussions and whatever. Day two is let's bootstrap. If we get a working project with a Maven build that works and can go to production, a CI environment every day, that's people would love that. Maybe it's not a whole day for just the incepting of product. More often than not, you'd get a copied and pasted Maven archetype or something like that nobody had updated in years, and there'd be like a wiki page with, here's the 500 things you should change after you've used our corporate Maven archetype and all that. And so Spring Boot, the starters, the Spring initializer, and the auto configuration made all that a relic of the past. Thank goodness. And so anyway, my point is I mentioned all that because I now have time to tell jokes. Before I couldn't do that. Okay, local directory. So delete remote files. Remember we had the delete source directory. Here's the delete remote files. We want to say yes, right? So once we've downloaded a file from the remote system, okay, once we've downloaded the file from the remote system to the local directory, we're then going to delete it on the FTP server so it doesn't get redelivered next time. It's going to send a message to another component here, right? So let's say, we want inbound from FTP. We're just going to print out what we see, and we're going to send it outbound to the file adapter. And the outbound is just going to put it in this directory, etc. So actually, this does two things. This is going to delete the file that was given to us from this. So I wonder, let's see if we keep that. Is the effect of this inbound directory to delete the local directory and the data in the FTP server, or does it just delete the data in the FTP server? And if I then add this, does that also delete the local file? Let's just find out without that first. Okay. Hello. Run. Whoa, what is going on there? Okay, file has been successfully transferred from blah blah blah. Okay, but we have our filter here that tests for CSVs. So it's been transferred to our local directory here, right? So let's go back. Wow, we got so much stuff here. Let me stop this. Edit configurations, delete that, this and this, hit apply. We're gonna go here, we're gonna say root is the FTP server, we want that. Out, what is files? Oh. Good, okay, so let's try this again. Run this. Why is it using Gradle? I want it to run as a Spring Boot application. Okay. Run as a Spring Boot application. I mean, I guess it doesn't have to, but I would prefer if it did. Spring Boot module. This one. This one. It was reopen the same project in IntelliJ. Why is it so confused about everything? Okay. Please work. Well, IntelliJ has given up on me. Okay, take two. Good. So did that throw an exception? No bean factory. Create standard evaluation context. Abstract inbound file synchronizer. I mean, sure. So good. What's the issue here? Goodness. My machine is crawling right now. I have no idea. Am I running Slack? What's going on? Okay, let's shut down some things while I still can. I'm as valuable as Pluralsight. I'm not sure what that means, but I appreciate it. Thank you very much. Oh, Pluralsight, the thing. Oh, okay. Thank you. Appreciate that. Okay, my laptop is usually my best friend, but it is not happy with me right now. So let's go back to the desktop. Files, RMRF root, cd, Spring Boot 3 and 5, git status, commit. Good. So let's code Apache FtpServer, Gradle, activity monitor. Let's see if there's anything lingering that's taking up memory, because things were just falling there for a second. Okay, it's not good when activity monitor is like too busy to help. Chrome. Oh, Docker Compose is taking a fair bit of power, and I don't need Docker Compose. So, Docker Compose down. I don't know. Just stop it outright. Do I just stop Docker? Uh, yeah, quit. So what about now? Yeah, okay. Okay. Google Chrome is now the king of the roost, taking 46% of a CPU. I've got, multiple CPUs, but still, I didn't plan on giving one of them to just one app. But okay, here we are. So this is now this one. We're going to start this one. Gradle W boot run away. And then let's code Spring integration via files build.gradle. Let's see what we get here, friends. Where are we? So there's nothing there, but let's say we go to the FTP directory, right? FTP root alone. Echo random to random CSV. Okay, so you can see it pulled down the data from the remote FTP server, copied it to the local files directory, and then that in turn, created a message. So we have the original file, just like we do with the inbound file adapter, because the FTP is basically a composite. It's pulling the data from FTP and then it's delivering it, just like with the inbound file adapter downstream. So we have the remote host, the name, the remote directory, the original file on the local machine, the ID, the relative path, etc. Okay. So now we should have, if this has worked correctly, we should have nothing there. So it deleted the thing on the remote server. And then we also have files. We see local. We have a local file. So what happens if we restart this? We deleted it from the FTP server, so we shouldn't get a new message. Ah, we do. Okay, so it's because it's using we have to delete the source file as well. Remember the outbound adapter? If you truly want to avoid both redelivering, delete source file, it's going to be true. So then restart it. There you go. So now there's no data in the FTP server and no data in the inbound folder, right? The local folder to which the FTP data was synchronized. So if I go to files, out, you can see all that's been put here. Get rid of that, all that, local, nothing in there. What about local? So if I do that, there's a file in there. And as soon as I put it in there, it was snapped up and then written out here. Yeah. So you can see it's pretty quick, right? Like it's almost a second. Very good. Okay, so now we've got file data that we're able to get very conveniently from the inbound adapter. What if I wanted to put it in the outbound adapter? What if I wanted to put it back in FTP? Pretty trivial. You can just use well, you could do a couple things. First of all, you might want to have it locally on a file system. Maybe you want to do some sort of processing here. This is a good time where you could use Spring Batch, right? I've got the file, it's CSV data. I might want to use the Spring Batch integration module. So org Spring Framework Batch, Spring Batch integration with the dashes in between. And that will be used to kick off. You can use the job launching message handler, basically. So given a Spring Framework message, it'll give you a chance to take the message, extract out any headers and payloads and whatever, and turn that into the inputs to a Spring Batch job. And then you can kick off that job in the same Java process, let it run, or you can send it to another node and kick off the job over there. And it can do processing. And then at the end of the Spring Batch job, you could even send a message back saying, hey, I'm done. And then another flow would kick off saying, okay, that's done. Market is finished. But in our case, maybe we just want to send the data out to another FTP server. So we say FTP outbound adapter. And same idea, we're going to use the same exact session factory. So FTP session factory. And we're not going to delete the source files because that doesn't make sense. But we do have similar options. Notice that for the file outbound adapter, we have a file name generator that is based on the current time, right? And you can see that here. If I go to files out, blah blah blah, it's timestamps, right? It's the same files as before, but they have timestamps now. Okay. So we're going to do the same thing for FTP now. We're going to move it to a different directory, remote directory processed. Okay, and we want to auto create directory. Yeah. What about the remote one? Will it create that automatically? Temporary remote directory. Aha. So remember we talked about I'm going to upload first and then move it to another one, right? So here's another way. Here's one way to do that. Create a temp folder. Put it in the temp folder. Then when the whole thing is written, move it from the temp folder to the actual process directory. I hope it'll create both of these for us automatically. Let's find out. Okay, so we've got no data in the inbound directory. CD boot along. Okay, echo random to random .csv. Oh, error on input file. Is it because I need to create those directories myself? Probably. So we want temp and processed in my JLong. So make dir -p temp processed. Uh-oh, did I just lose you? Or is it just my iPad that's having trouble? Oh, yes. Okay, good. So now take 2. Rename. There you go. So you can see I had to create those remote directories myself. That's a little annoying. So warning, make sure to create. Okay. So that's pretty straightforward, temp and processed. I'm expecting in the remote directory under JLong to have these folders. If they're not there, things will fail, okay? But what it does is it's gonna take the file that we have in the inbound directory, and then we're not doing anything useful to it, but you can imagine that you might, and then we're sending it out to another directory. So basically, this is just moving files from one folder to another. Pretty boring, but it does work. Okay, so let's try that. Let's see what did that work? It should have worked, right? So if we go here to long in the process directory, there's that file that's so actually we can kind of it's fast enough that we could just do this. So watch cd desktop files, watch -n ls -la. Okay, so it's just going to monitor. Oh no, I don't want to do ls. I want to do tree. Okay, so it's going to do that. Okay, so now I'm in the FTP folder. I'm in my folder in the FTP server. Okay, I'm going to create a file here. Echo random to random dot csv. And you can see, right, almost instantly, within a second, you see it pop out over here and then over there. Actually, it's kind of interesting, isn't it? Why isn't it popping out into the FTP server? Oh, renamed temp processed. So you can see it says temp blah 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 dot writing to process. So it's doing that pattern exactly what I just told you about, where you rename it. So why is it not in? Oh, it's in the. Oh, right. This one is correct. Okay, and then we want the FTP directory itself. CD desktop root along. So watch -n ls la. Okay, so oops, tree again. So there you go. As I make changes over here, it's growing the process directory on the FTP server itself live really quickly. Okay, that's basic file integration. As a client, all of this is as a client. Let's round this session off with a quick look at the support for Apache FTP server from the perspective of Spring. Like in this case, Spring integration is the FTP server, right? It's the integrate. You're receiving messages from the outside world via Apache FTP server. Okay, and this is a possibility that I just realized was possible yesterday when we looked at that code that I'd written from that Spring Tips video from a few years ago, back in 2020, 2020, and of course, famously, nothing crazy happened that year, right? So it's ridiculous. How it was like I can't even believe that I sit here now and I'm like, I remember 2020. Do you remember that TikTok song Carol Baskin, right? Like it came on a show that my partner and I were watching yesterday, and she like looked up, her brow furrowed because that song is like it every time I hear it, I think of lockdown, March of 2020. And it just throws me back. It was very dated, very much in that moment, more than a lot of songs. I've heard a lot of songs before, but for some reason that one it's etched in my mind for better or for worse. Okay, so yesterday we discovered there's this code I wrote a while ago. Let's revisit that. Integration, FTP, integration. Here we go, FTP server. Okay, so what did we do yesterday? There's the FTP server. It's got a file system factory. Did we create one of those for ours? Set case sensitive, set home, create home. Oh, that's probably the default. I created lifecycle methods. Oh, that's it. That's kind of interesting. Maybe I should do that for the new one that we created. All right, so where's our FTP server? Desktop, text code, FTP server, idea, build.gradle. Open that up. Okay. Oh, wow, you can see Spring Integration is doing a scan. Look at all that noise. Look at all that activity. Spring Integration is doing a scan on the, it's connecting and it's pulling it every second. So it's creating a lot of like log in, log out for the Apache FTP server, and FTP server is just happy the entire time, no problem. Okay. So let's start this FTP server, but we'll paste that code in there first. Okay. Good. So now we have a, where's our FTP server? This is being start here, starting it there. So I just return a bean of type FTP server, which you got to figure that's probably a better approach anyway. And then we use the user manager. There's that. And that. And I guess I don't need this anymore because we have the start method doing the work of actually kicking it off. Okay, so we've got the FTP server, and we have these callbacks to destroy the FTP server and start the FTP server, so that we have a bit of indirection between when the server is created and when it actually gets started up. Okay, what else do we want? NIO listener, I didn't configure that. That's the port on which the FTP server should connect and run. So you could configure that like this: factory FTP server factory.listeners singleton map of. And by the way, this is before map.of, which I'm totally use now. What else? So it looks like that's all pretty straightforward, just basic FTP server stuff. Let's see. Integration configuration, is it? Okay. So here we have something called an Apache Mina FTP lit. Where does that get plugged in? Does Spring Integration no. Where does this get, what happens if we add this? What is this? Oh, because my build doesn't have Spring Integration in it yet. So let's add that as well. Okay. Build.gradle. Spring Integration file in FTP. Okay, restart. So what does this do? How does it work? So this emits events from the FTP server as Spring Framework application events. So the question is, how does this get plugged into the FTP server's lifecycle? And I'm not sure. Where does this get used? Apache FTP lit. So user manager. Oh, FtpLets. Okay, so we're injecting all the FtpLets, including the Spring Framework one here, and we're setting it on the FTP server factory. Okay, so there's this life cycle. There's something called an FtpLet in the Apache Mina FTP server. We can ask Spring to give us all the beans and their bean name and the bean reference as a map, and we can then pass that map to the server factory.set FtpLets. Okay, and then that's this right here, and so that's going to discover, that'll inject this one as well. That'll be connected, and now what's going to happen is I'm going to get events on the Spring framework, on the Apache FTP server side. I'm going to act as a inbound. So Apache Mina FTP event class, or there you go, void FTP event Apache. Now I can listen for that event, and I can say, okay, got a new event as an FTP server. FTP event dot get source FTP session. I don't know. Let's just log it out and see what we get. Okay. So remember, this is the FTP server itself, but we're now connecting it with Spring integration. So now, as an FTP server, when something happens, Spring integration, we can publish an event as an application context event, and then, as we'll see in a minute, you can then use Spring integration to listen for those events as well. Okay. Okay, pretty straightforward. So nothing. We're gonna just log in. Forget about our client for a moment. We've got the client over here, but it's not running at the moment, right? It's not doing anything. But let's say we do FTP, LFTP, U, JLong, PW, localhost. Okay. Now what? So put desktop files, local. That's the Apache Mina FTP server. And we got a Spring framework application context event as well. So whenever a file gets added to the FTP server, when a client connects to this code as a Spring integration app, which is hosting an embedded FTP server, we get an event. Okay, we have this event, and we can actually listen for that. And so now this is an FTP event. You've got the source, which is the default FTP session, IO session, context. So does it give us any information about oh, I guess this is when a session is opened. Okay, so that's called a session opened event. Okay, so we have an event listener here for void session opened. Right, session open event. Okay, so for that session opened. Okay, there's that. And then I guess there's another one here, void session closed event. Okay. System out session closed. Okay, so there's that. And what else? What other events do we have? So let's keep going. Okay. This modify time. Got a new, okay, default FTP session event. Let's do a put. I'll upload. Got a new event, FTP service. It's not telling us about the same file. It is. It's actually printing it out. Okay, there. So we're not getting the events. So let's restart. You can see there. Oh, okay, there you go. So you can see there's a file written event. There's an FTP request event, path moved event, directory created event. So you can listen for all these different events as event listeners, right? And Spring Framework will notify you about them, and you can do something about it. Now, taking this a step further, back to our friend Spring Integration, there's a very convenient inbound application event publishing adapter. So I think I even had that in the code, and we'll just use that because I don't want to have to fumble in the dark trying to remember everything. This one. So this one I need the module for events. So message channel, import that. Integration flow. This is now using the new .integration flow. We're going to add in the logger. I do, good. Okay, I have Lombok. I don't need something here. Don't need that. Okay, so what is that doing for us, friends? That is, we have an inbound channel. We have a channel. We have this thing that we've connected to our FTP user manager thing, the FTP session. This is going to publish. This is glue code that takes events published by the FTP server and turns them into Spring Framework application event subclasses, and those get published through the event bus. And you saw you can use regular Spring Framework at event listener to listen for some of these events. And there's also an application event listening message producer, which listens for events of type Apache Mina event and then sends a message containing that event onto this channel. And then, of course, you can create an integration flow that listens from that channel and processes the new event. Okay, so you're going to see the same information logged 2 different times, right? Log.info, log.info again. Okay, so we're going to start up the FTP server. Good. Let's just try it, I guess. Okay. So where's our FTP server new event from here, right? So now we get an event as a message. And what can we do with that? Well, it's Spring integration now. We're in Spring integration land. So whenever somebody uploads a new file to the FTP server from the FTP side, if we are the administrator of that FTP server, we can now write Spring integration code to process that new file or to process the fact that somebody created a new directory or something. So now you could write Spring integration code to then call a database or whatever, to kick off a batch job, whatever you want, right? So this is the reverse. Instead of pulling data from somebody else's FTP server and then pulling it down to the local machine and processing it that way, this is the opposite side, which is now we have exposed an FTP server and we can write code to listen for new events and to process those new files that get dropped in the FTP server. Pretty cool. All right, friends. Yeah, it's been fun. I think we got through a lot more than I was expecting to. Oh, wait, no. Let me do one more thing here. I'm just keen to see if this will still compile to native image because that's my new favorite magic trick. Let's see. Gradle W native compile. Oh, well, I have no idea what just happened there, but I'll look into it. All right, my friends. On that bombshell, thank you. Have a great day. Hope you're doing well. Go download Java 20. It's awesome. You know, we'll catch up again very soon. Actually, I'll see you tomorrow. It's only Thursday today. I'll see you tomorrow. And then Saturday, the girls and I are heading to Los Angeles. We're heading for. I live in San Francisco, so it's a 6 hour drive. Um, and it's my daughter's spring break. So don't cry for me. I'll be fine. We're going to Disneyland. Okay. All right, everybody. I'll see y'all tomorrow. It's gonna be awesome. We'll continue our journey of Spring integration. Either I'll have fixed this or not, but I think we're pretty close to good on files. We've spent like 3 days looking at files, so we're gonna move on to, I don't know, maybe we can do databases or something. All right. Bye.